the biggest thing, and like the biggest reason that a lot of countries are in decline at the moment is because of wealth inequality. And like how he explains it is essentially like the reason the house prices are so high is not because of immigration. It's because like you essentially have these ultra rich people, like either they're like families of basically oligarchs, like ultra rich families, like what's the word, like wealthy families that have been wealthy for like, you know, the last century. Or it's like, you know, big companies that are like, you know, like BlackRock and like investment firms. And they, generational wealth, that's the one. Perfect, thank you. But essentially like these groups buy up properties in areas that they think will increase in value over time, like cities. Because demand will always increase for housing. And they will just hold them. They will just sit on them. They'll either hold the property and rent it out, and whilst they rent it, obviously, the property is increasing in value, and someone is paying them to live there, which is just like, that's like having a money printer, basically. Or they sell the property to someone who gets a mortgage out on it, and then, you know, that's like big bucks. But the people on the other side of the mortgages, because you think about money, it's like you could have a mortgage on a house. You're paying the mortgage to the bank, but like the bank is basically lending you the money and you're paying it back to them. Someone is on the other side of that. Like the bank hasn't just conjured up the money to give to you to buy the house. Like the money that the bank has given you is an investment from someone who is extremely wealthy, who has either got their money at that bank or has invested it in some sort of fund that is for mortgages. So like either way, whether you try and mortgage or rent, like you're giving money to banks and extremely rich people. The extremely rich, both individuals and companies, will eventually just hoard assets because that's like the easiest way for them to earn more money and to like keep their money safe. So what you're basically going to see is, unless it like changes, is you're going to see less and less assets going around for people. Like you could build like millions of more houses, but you know the ultra rich, the asset managers will just buy them up again, and then you know it's sort of like a trickle down effect. It's kind of like trickle down. It is, his whole argument is how trickle down economics doesn't work, because the interest of the rich is like hoarding wealth essentially, like, and the rich will only spend money where it can basically make them more money, and the way they do that is assets. And the whole reason that house prices are going to go up and up and up is because like you build a house in this country, at least the way it works here, you build a house, either the company building it is like a multi-million firm who will just sit on it and wait for it to appreciate in value, or rent it out to people. Well, that's basically it, really. Like, you're either like a small-time landlord, which is like fine, or you're like one of these big boys. But eventually, like the big companies are going to buy out. You know, that's like, the whole argument is, if you don't do anything about it, eventually the ultra rich will just hoard assets and keep buying more assets until, you know, people get squeezed out, so that no one can own a home. And everyone will just be paying the ultra rich rent. Why are we letting these companies, these foreign oligarchs, you know, own assets in this country, when like the only point is for them just to hoard wealth using them? Like a lot of people seem to think like there's going to be a housing market crash, but like I don't think that there will be. I used to think there would be, because like I think people say that because they want it to happen. You know, it's like a bias, because they're like, you know, it's going to happen, and then I can get a house. But like these big like banks have learnt from 2008. Like, there's not a way in hell that they're going to allow that to happen again. Like, so it's in their interest to not allow that to happen. It's easy. That's the root cause of the issue, and that's why like Trump is in. That's why Elon Musk is like influencing like the AFD and reform here in the UK. It's because, unfortunately, people look at these issues. They're like, house prices are so high. It's because we're getting, it's because we're letting immigrants in. Like, you could not only stop immigration, and none of the issues would be solved. Like, absolutely nothing would change. You would just see less immigrants, and if that's a good thing for you, then you're probably racist. I almost have like more respect for racist people because at least they're like forthcoming with their prejudice. You know, people who say like, "Oh, we need less immigrants because of the economy," like that is not true. And the reason that they think that is because media is telling them to think that, and the media is owned by multimillionaire, individuals whose interest it is for ordinary people not to look at the multimillionaires and say, "Oh, hang on a minute, these guys own all of the houses and they're renting them back to ordinary people for exorbitant rates. They keep buying more houses and doing the same thing with them. House prices aren't going to drop because the issue is, these ginormous landlord sort of trust funds, banks, and even individuals. You look at people, they're like, oh yeah, we need to cut immigration in half. It's just like, yeah, but why do you think that? Like, it's because you've seen it, on your Twitter feed, because it's being boosted by Elon Musk. Because people like Elon Musk would rather you be angry at immigrants than angry at the ultra rich. And like this goes up a level. I'm rambling right now, but this goes up, and this sounds like conspiratorial, but like you just need to like look and understand what is happening on social media and in the news. And like with the sudden like shift of Trump getting in, and all of a sudden all of these like tech bros have like leapt over the fence. You had like Zuckerberg at his inauguration. Like, the thing you need to understand is like higher level. So baseline, people like Elon Musk do not want you to think that the ultra rich are the issue. They want you to think that the immigrants are the issue because it's easy to convince people that they are, and it gets the heat off of them. You take that up a notch. People like Elon Musk also benefit from immigration because it's like cheap, low-skilled wages, H-1B, all that shit. So they don't want you to hate immigrants too much. So basically what they've got to do is try and convince people that immigrants are the problem, but not so much that all of the immigrants go. Because once all the immigrants are gone and things don't improve, then people realise that it is wealth-hoarding multi-billionaires that are the cause of a lot of society's problems. So they've got to find like the sweet spot where they like socially engineer right-wing politics enough so that people think immigrants are like the cause of issues in society, but not too much, because once all the immigrants are gone, their scapegoat is gone. And I came to that realization like a couple of weeks ago, and I was just like, oh my god, like the whole fucking thing, the whole like right-wing sphere is like, it's like a fucking washing machine. It's insanity. And like you look at people that are like have bought into the whole like Trumpian right-wing populism, and you're like, what, how have you, like, it's just like people have had the wool pulled over their eyes. And it's not even like a left versus right thing. It's just like a follow the money and look where the interests are. Like, it's in the ultra rich's interests for you to not think that they're leeching wealth out of the economy. Okay, so what are they going to do about it? Well, they're going to, buy media institutions and have media institutions tell that to people. And then those people will vote for parties that they're funding, like Donald Trump, the AFD in Germany, Reform in the UK. So, like, you've basically got billionaires influencing politics and media to divert people's attention from the terrible things that they're doing all around the world. Okay, so like, what are we living in? We're living in like global oligarchy, essentially. It's like brilliant. Fucking piss. Like, I've just been like stewing on this for a while, so this is really nice for me just to sit and rant about this. That is the thing. You have more in common than an immigrant than you do with like Elon Musk or like Rupert Murdoch. Like that's just a fact. I guarantee you could go to that immigrant's house and have a dinner party, and you'd have a better time than if you went to Elon Musk's house and had a dinner party. Mainly because Elon Musk would be sitting there, you know, ketted up to the gills, fucking looking around like a lizard, you know. God, watch your wallet. And your drink probably as well. This is what I was trying to get to. Actually, I've sort of half remembered the point I was going to make. Like the whole like right wing populist talking point is like, you know, it's the global elites. They're running the show. You know, it's George Soros and all that stuff. You know, and it's like, well, they're half right because yeah, it is the global elites, but they're doing like the opposite of what they're saying they're doing at the moment. Like they're pulling the wool over your eyes. Like the global elites are on your side. They're the ones they're doing the funding. They're funding, you know, the far right. They're funding right-wing media. They're the beneficiaries of making people think that immigrants are the real problem in societies. So yeah, it is the global elite, but it's not how like the right I say like right wing, I say like, you know, like populist right, whatever. It's not how they think it is. It's like they've got it but they don't at the same time. And it's the same thing with politicians in the UK. It's like, oh yeah, it's for the working man. Nigel Farage is looking out for working class interests. It's like, no, he's not. He's a fucking ex-investment hedge fund banker. He couldn't give a toss what a nurse's salary is. Like, I'm sorry. Could not give a fuck. You know, he's not going to give teachers a pay rise or anything like that. He's going to get into power, and then he's going to do the exact same thing that the Conservatives did when they were in power, which is scrap spending and like divvy up public services, privatise them, and give them to his mates. And him and his mates will make so much money from it. It's unbelievable. It's like, you look at that and you're like, so like you can just, that is like, it is like foreign influence. You've got a guy from South Africa, you know, who is definitely not a Nazi, and is, you know, his dad owning an emerald mine during apartheid South Africa definitely left no imprint on his worldview. Who is basically like influencing entire national elections across the world. And then like the irony is that like the MAGA people will be like, yeah, global elites, we don't want them interfering with our elections. George Soros. It's like, well, you've got it happening in your favour. Like, are you still mad about it or no? Like, is this fine? It's one of those things, you know, when you're watching a car crash happen, but you can't look away, whatever you do. Bill O'Reilly was God. Is he like an old-timey presenter? I recognise the face, actually. Dismissed in 2017 following 5 settled lawsuits of sexual misconduct. Sounds about right. Good old Tucker. I used to be massive into the old Tucker Carlson show back in the day. But I used to be a right little right-wing freak. And then I realised that, all of these people have wealth that I will never see, and me having right-wing beliefs and talking points is not going to make me money. I think you either have to already be well off, otherwise as like as a poor kid, I was like, oh yeah, I'll pull myself up by my bootstraps, and if I just get out of secondary school with good qualifications and get a job, I'll be fine. It's like, it's not actually how things work. It's how things worked 60 years ago. It's not how things work today. Well, yeah, that's what I mean. The agenda doesn't benefit you. Like, the whole, pull yourself up by your bootstraps thing is, complete horseshit. Because it turns out that, not every single individual has equal footing in life and can just self-sustain themselves. You can't go from, not everyone is on the same baseline. I think once you wrap your head around that crazy concept, you're like, oh, so this is all bullshit. and all these talking heads really view people as sort of economic units. Once you're I feel like it's almost easier. I think it's happening as a young person to be sucked up into the right-wing thinking, because you're at a time in your life where you don't have a lot of responsibility. You don't really need to worry about doing anything. So it's oh yeah, I'll just I'll go out and get a job and everything will be okay. And I'll have a house by the time I'm 25. And I'll be married and have kids by 30. It's it's not achievable for most people, for most ordinary people. I think it should be, but I don't think just saying work hard is going to get people there. People are so fixated on making it, It's like the American dream syndrome. Maybe I'll be a bank teller in about 6 months. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the thinking, isn't it? It's maybe if I work hard, I'll be sorted. It's that's not how things work. It works for 5% of people. Probably more than that, to be honest. But for the majority of people, they will do that, and then personal tragedy will strike, or they'll get fucking fired because it's 2008 and the economy's just crashed. People compete. You need to understand that you're competing against other people. Not everyone is going to make it to $1 million in their fucking 401k or retirement ISA. That's not achievable for most people. That will never be achievable for most people, because most people aren't just drones that will just go and do that. It's just the whole I think it's the Reaganist sort of Thatcher era that has bled through to now still, where it's society isn't real. It's all about being the individual, and part of that is, if everyone's an individual, then you're all competing all the time. It's why things when I haven't had this much yet, but when friends when your friends move out and you're still living with your parents, you feel a bit of it's not guilt, it's you feel you're lagging behind a bit. That is that sort of thought process. That's the whole idea that you're competing with your peers. That is the cause of that. Because it's and you shouldn't think oh well, I wish I'd be moving out right now, or or be jealous of them. You should feel happy for them. But there's that thing in the back of your mind where it's okay, I'm not doing as good as my friends. It's that's not something you should worry about in a society, in a community. You shouldn't be comparing yourself to your friends. Being oh, my friend is doing well, so I need to compare myself to them. And if I'm not doing as well as them, then clearly something's wrong with me. or like I'm doing a bad job at living or at life. That's that like thought process of like pull yourself up by your bootstraps and like just gotta have a go-get 'em attitude. It's not how things work. You can't treat people like they're individual nodes of economic value, because then they'll just feel like shit when they don't do good, because they've been told work hard and you'll make it. It's like, well, you wonder why like fucking mental health crises are skyrocketing. It's like a bit of a taboo subject. Oh, do you still live with your parents? It's like, so what? It's like it's fine. I have to now because fucking house prices are so expensive, because I can't buy them because the multi-million companies that own them and want to rent them or mortgage them out to me are hoarding them. Trying to like understand why people feel as though that they aren't doing good in their like life path is definitely like, it's a symptom of like a society that is basically focused around money as a concept. I'm not saying like, abolish money or anything. I'm just saying like, because we live in a society where things are getting more and more expensive, people are going to be thinking about making as much money as possible all the time. So it's just like a natural thing it's like a natural follow-on of that. Competition is great. Yeah, I think it is a human nature thing at the same time. But then like, human nature also told us that we should form communities and all of the food should be piled up in one place and shared and distributed to the whole tribe, So it's like there's a balance that needs to be struck. And I think like the last like 40 years, we've been like heavily into the individuality thing. Like if we were purely individualistic human beings, we wouldn't be where we are today. We'd still be like, running around naked, eating berries and nuts, because we don't want to share things with people. There's like an innateness to share, but there's also an innateness to compete. And it's like, which way do you go? You can't go one. I don't think you can go like all in one direction either way. I just won a 6 sword. Nice.